If I say Uncharted 4, what image comes to mind? A gripping story? Unmatched action set pieces? That drive through Madagascar that makes use of specialized animations just for an 8-minute car chase, making it feel wholly directed by you. Or maybe you remember something a little more quiet, a little more personal, a little more detailed. Soft dappled lighting paints the final dinner of long-lost pirates, whose loudness still echoes proudly, juxtaposed to the delicacy of their untouched remains. If I say Uncharted 4 multiplayer, what comes to mind? Sully in an alien costume, dabbing?
Alright, well, no one's here to dance with me, so I guess I'll dance by myself.
Maybe you were shocked to find out that there even was a multiplayer, as its developer Naughty Dog left the mode behind in their most recent remasters. I don't blame you for not knowing. Naughty Dog as a studio is known for their robust single-player campaigns. They market their games solely based on their story. Yet, only until 2020's The Last of Us 2 did Naughty Dog finally stop including multiplayer. It's a completely quantifiable decision. Multiplayer modes for big AAA narrative games were an odd vestigial organ from an earlier time in gaming history, where the worth of a game as an entertainment package could be relatively easily bolstered with the addition of multiplayer. Nowadays, it seems as though the development cost and market saturation largely killed off the trend. The only remaining offenders now enter the fray with hopes of creating a platform cannibalized out of their own nostalgia and player base. But as cynical as the AAA narrative multiplayer is positioned, in a market flooded with free alternatives like Fortnite, novelty has become a possible tactic to attract players. For the few games that are still trying, it means they got weird. And oh, Resident Evil ReVerse, what a cynical, beautiful, weird construction you are. Well, okay, let me temper your expectations a little. ReVerse is a casual, free-for-all multiplayer shooter. I know, a genre so well worn by iteration, then perfection, then boredom by Call of Duty and the like that the genre alone can provoke strong disinterest. To clarify, if you don't like the frenetic rhythm of a Call of Duty match, I don't think you'd like playing ReVerse that much. Yet, the game so wonderfully commits to this remixing of Resident Evil's essence that they managed to create a Resident Evil Call of Duty that's genuinely fun, unique, and celebrates the franchise's most experimental action instincts. To any longtime Resident Evil fan, the claim Resident Evil Call of Duty should immediately raise red flags. It's a mashup that the franchise has consistently rammed its bloated head into, nearly killing itself in the process. There have been many attempts at a combat-oriented PvP mode, Capcom even producing 2 spin-off games, but they were created when Resident Evil's identity was at least partially defined by a unique control scheme, making combat sluggish. Pair that with an economically incentivized push to westernize the franchise during the early 2010s, and it's no wonder why the outcome was a largely uninspired, tainted multiplayer legacy. It's a history that has disillusioned its fanbase, teaching them to instantly lash out against any potential Resident Evil competitive shooter. Just one look at the comment section of ReVerse's teaser trailer can show you that. How could ReVerse possibly be anything but a poorly timed corporate cash grab? What Neobards realize is that one of the most successful features of a Resident Evil game is the thrill of being chased by a monster. Sounds obvious, but 4 out of the 5 most recent Resident Evil games use an unkillable stalker enemy as a major selling point. The mechanic instantly creates a memorable relationship to the player, in turn building a sort of mascot that helps set each game's tone. Capcom has been experimenting with the stalker enemy for a long time, even appearing as early as the original Resident Evil 2. But within the recent RE Engine era, it definitively confirmed that the stalker enemy is Resident Evil, just as much as the Umbrella Corporation is. This is the element that became the basis for differentiating the Resident Evil shooter. But it set up the inevitable question: how can you incorporate that chase within a twitchy reaction shooter? By embracing the franchise's underlying camp. When a player dies, they will literally transform into one of Resident Evil's iconic monsters. It's a risky departure from the typical deathmatch formula, and one so shamelessly gimmicky that it asserts itself as a casual experience. But don't let the gimmick fool you. The game plays fluidly, using design influences from the hero shooter, arena shooter, and its own franchise to create a hectic experience that acts unlike any other I've played. It is this very commitment to such a silly idea that let me ignore all the cynicism. At its most basic level, ReVerse is a hero shooter. It's probably the least interesting part of the game, but its execution proves how competent Neobards is as a studio. Their approach was to streamline and merge various contemporary mechanics to create a familiar foundation. ReVerse uses the Resident Evil 3 remake as their gunplay and movement template. What it means is that it's actually a very slow shooter. That alone should have been its death knell, but by incorporating Remake's dodge roll with a simple new stamina system, it efficiently adds just enough complexity to an otherwise unremarkable moveset. The streamlining continues in the heroing of the hero shooter, which reinterprets classic Resident Evil protagonists with a unique loadout and 2 cooldown abilities. Ada Wong is a clear standout, equipped with her crossbow from RE6, an acrobatic dodge, and a grapple gun-assisted explosive. Not only are these classic Ada traits, but clearly she's tuned to play more like a glass cannon. These abilities don't create novel hero dynamics, but they are successfully different enough from each other to give each match a unique texture. The final spice for hero gameplay takes inspiration from arena shooters. Items are strewn all across the map in the form of ammo, health, heavy weapons, and virus capsules. At its best, ReVerse was trying to find interesting intersections between these mechanics. A later released character named Tundra was given the ability to place explosive decoys on item spawn locations. You can't just phone in mechanics like that. Neobards put in the work to design the maps and abilities to work in tandem with each other. This effort is felt in the way that, for as slow as the heroes are, the game's complexity still derives from its movement. Nearly every encounter offers cover or an item just one dodge roll away, without the environments feeling overly claustrophobic or repetitive. But let's not forget, the work on display here is only half the game. From the first moment a hero is killed, the desperate rush to chase, impale, and consume begins. Monsters are built to enact impulsively violent gameplay. They move faster than the heroes, have more health than the heroes, only attack through melee, and most importantly, can see the location of all other players at all times. Each trait coalesces to form a simpler objective: catch up to the enemy. When the objective is that simple, it allows the gameplay to be much more experimental. Playing as a monster feels weird, like when the audio and video desync during a movie. Monsters have this momentum for every action, to the point that moving around feels like a sloppy kart racer. Pair that with attacks that need to play out their whole animation, and it suddenly makes sense why you have so much more health and enemy awareness. As a monster, the first real enemy you're fighting are the controls. I honestly think it's a pretty big risk to use such exaggerated movements as a fundamental part of the game. A reaction shooter works by offering a control scheme that feels extremely responsive and intuitive. It wants to test each player's speed, so the controls are there to facilitate the sport, not be the spectacle itself. What ReVerse does by creating this sticky movement is shifting what the game wants to test you on. ReVerse isn't as interested in how well you shoot. It wants to test what tactics you use for each encounter. Is running directly toward a hero not working? Use the knowledge of their location to try and flank them. If that doesn't work, try following other monsters to form a natural horde. Well, what happens if the hero still manages to win? Use both lessons at the same time to flank a hero who is already occupied with someone else. This is how a smart use of simple mechanics naturally invites deeper levels of active strategizing without players even noticing. It also takes advantage of a player base that's possibly uninterested in traditional multiplayer precision, offering an equally viable, almost cathartic alternative against a presupposed familiarity of skills. There are 6 monsters overall, split into 3 tiers. What monster you'll play depends on how many of those virus capsules you collect. Collect none and you'll become the lovely fat molded. Collect 1 and you'll turn into a randomly picked first tier monster. Lycan, Hunter Y, or Jack Baker. With 2 vials, you'll either become the iconic Nemesis or Super Tyrant. Each monster moves differently and has 2 special abilities that completely change how you approach encounters. Jack Baker probably turns the slowest, awkwardly hobbling around with his scissor chainsaw. His special attacks are a 360 chainsaw spin and an even sillier cutscene punch. Because of his momentum, simply chasing after enemies is usually a death sentence. Unlocking his potential is learning when and where to use the chainsaw spin. The secret is that the spin attack can knock heroes on their asses, while the cutscene punch becomes an instant kill when afflicted onto fallen heroes. The coolest thing is that while you were learning the basics of monster gameplay, you unknowingly became part of the iconic Resident Evil chase.
Stay still!
Successfully adapting the monster chase wasn't about preserving the anxiety of a stalking enemy. It was about finding out if the chase could push the momentum of a competitive shooter. Instead of one unkillable stalking enemy, there's now an unending barrage of monsters that are constantly trying to surprise and kill you. Since hero locations are known at all times, pursuit is inevitable. The desensitization to anxiety occurs fast, and competition eagerly fills its place. Matches for REverse are limited to 5 minutes, and in a full lobby of 6 players, each moment whizzes by as every player desperately attempts to survive clash after clash. One of the smartest yet simplest inclusions that intensifies the thrill of a monster chase is the inclusion of a revenge system. When you kill an opponent in REverse, it isn't a straightforward addition to your kill count. You get 20 points for a successful kill and lose 5 points if you die. There are additional points awarded to other statistics such as kill streaks or killing the top player, but the highest and fastest payout comes in the form of a revenge kill. When a player is killed, a skull symbol is placed above their murderer, and if they take revenge, they'll be awarded with an additional 20 points. What this little system does is initiate a mini hunt. Most times, it's too alluring to ignore the possibility for 40 points, and if you died as a hero, you now have a second chance for immediate revenge. This constant pursuit often leads to a hectic clusterfuck of monsters and heroes all chasing after one another. And if you manage to survive, danger looms just around the corner, your success being reciprocated with instant karma. It's such a perfectly paired system that I can't imagine it working as well in any other shooter. Honestly, this one small detail may be what pushes the game's momentum over the edge. But what good are all these systems if the maps can't facilitate interesting gameplay? I'm not the largest Resident Evil fan, but the verse really got me here. Maps in REverse are, as you've probably noticed, reinterpreted locations seen throughout the franchise. They've been heavily altered, but the layout is surprisingly recognizable. Some people might assume that this was a lazy, cheap decision, but I don't care, because whatever the reason was, it's too cool for me to have any complaints. Too cool. What? Why? Because these maps work. It's so sick that the design goals for a completely different game could be leveraged to allow for an entirely new game to work on top of it. I want to take a look at the most successful adaptation, the RPD. There's something potent in the familiarity, a gnawing feeling hiding in plain sight, which fully awakens when prodded with competitive ambitions. Loops. Tons and tons of loops. The Raccoon City Police Department in Resident Evil 2 Remake was where the cat and mouse chase between the player and Mr. X unfolded. In order to accommodate this chase, every room and corridor was designed with the dual purpose of creating tense yet escapable moments. Let's look at RE2's map to see how they did it. There is a carefully constructed flow here, emerging from overlapping loops. Regardless of whatever point you're at in this map, you're never too far from the flow. Even if you're really lost, you can easily keep pushing forward. Just don't forget, RE2 is still a single-player game, prioritizing design that makes the player feel anxious. Corridors are tall and narrow, doors funnel you through inefficient routes, and most of the map is drenched in darkness. Darkness actually highlights a core aspect I want to focus on, severely limiting visual information. For Resident Evil, an unlocked door is still a closed door, especially in the context of a monster chase. When players are limited to only their immediate vicinity, each room successfully sets up a Mr. X punchline. Level design's job is to enhance every opportunity for paranoia. Look at the map. It seems like a bunch of boring rectangles. However, by keeping everything cubical, it means sharp corners and similar hallways. The game is testing your resolve at keeping cool, because if you freak out and mindlessly run away, there's always a chance you'll catch yourself running past the only way out. So how the hell does this map work in multiplayer? Shall we look at ReVerse's interpretation? Before we even touch loops, let's get all the elephants out of the room. Most of the spaces have been widened by nearly twice their original size. A cartoon boulder apparently ran through every door, and fluorescent lights are back on the menu. After all these changes, does it still feel like the same police station? Yes! Turns out what makes the RPD is really that iconic main hall and probably this one side room that said, "Welcome, Leon." A lot of clutter and detail is taken out to increase player mobility, but if you haven't played Remake recently, the increased size fits the grand vibe the hall always had. It's like an even more palatable version of misremembering that the original RE2 never had a staircase at all. For the rest of the building, the fact that you were mostly walking around with a flashlight makes it difficult to remember exactly what these locations look like in the first place. At the sacrifice of atmosphere, the game now accommodates the action of a shooter while still retaining the central charm of its location. An aesthetic A+ from me. How exactly has the layout been changed? Ready for a little remodeling? Knowing that ReVerse would be a smaller 6-person deathmatch, Neobards essentially stripped down the first floor to its most distinctive elements. Tons of walls were knocked down to allow for better flanking, and doubled down on the loops. What we have here is a lean, mean, weird little map. On its surface, there's an isolating quality here. If you're on the staircase and action is occurring in the operations room, there's truly no way to know what's happening there. Neobards' secret weapon was to streamline the search for opponents by making the map interact like two sections. The main hall works wonderfully as one large arena, providing some much needed verticality and the ability to easily view the entire space. Demolishing the wall here works double duty, incorporating the east side's major loop and offering a comprehensive line of sight into the area. In doing so, the east side becomes an extension of the main hall. If this half of the map is made to be easily surmisable, whatever you don't see must be happening on the west side. The west side is a little battlefield on its own. What allows these cluster of rooms to interact like one unified space was the removal of the West Hall barricade, creating an interconnected no man's land highway between the office, rooms, and hallway. It's almost too many loops coinciding in one small area, but each path carefully offers balanced options between risk and opportunity. Efficient paths become more vulnerable, while safer paths take a longer time to traverse. Personally, my favorite part is how the West Hall and the West Office converge. These are two areas with a ton of vulnerabilities, so escaping into either one isn't particularly safe. By positioning the new entrance on the south end of the office, it elevates this dangerous intersection into a tactical standoff, offering equal staging for a chase or combat. For me, I see these changes not as a design conceit, but really mindful decisions that enhance the structure that was already there. New passageways work in conversation with the old, both designed to heighten a chase, just for different occasions. The flow from remakes still remains, this time directing a constant stream of action that engages the entire map. Is it the best multiplayer map in the world? Absolutely not. In fact, the other maps don't work nearly as well because they weren't initially designed with as much of a chase in mind. But come on! These familiar halls built for horror get to cheer you on as a monster. That's gotta count for something. I really made it seem like this was the ultimate RE game, but there's plenty of corny and straight up bad parts I've yet to mention. Of course, there's a battle pass with plenty of silly dances, alternate skins, and little gun charms. Honestly, I'm all for it. If you're milking my nostalgia in a purely aesthetic way, I say milk away. You're telling me that there's a Jack Baker in underwear alt skin? Shut the fuck up, I love it. But then there's the actual game-changing BS that I'm not here for. Each hero is given a whole upgradable skill set that unimaginatively cheapens the game, boosting basic stats from damage to health. If you're going to make the game unbalanced, at least give me wild perks, like every item becomes a heavy weapon. Although, nah, that sounds really annoying. Just stick to the cosmetics. Also, monster versus monster fights in REverse are really not that interesting. Most monsters move sluggish and fight slow, right? So the fights become a literal trading of blows. As one side finishes, the other side begins. The only defense of the sloppy monster fights is that it encourages monsters to pursue heroes. Not to undercut my own argument, but revenge kills will often set up monster-on-monster fights. The thing is, I really don't care. The jankiness of monster fights adds to the silly charm, and there's still a level of skill involved in trying to juke out the other monster, so just deal with it. The most actually damning part of REverse is inherent to its now in existence. REverse was a multiplayer live service game. That means everything was dependent on the vicious cycle of player engagement and new content. In 2022, REverse officially released with the intensity of a corpse at its own wake. 6 heroes, 5 monsters, and 2 stages. The year before had brought an open beta so harshly received that it was met with a year-long delay. Most critiques hinged on 3 things: its aesthetics, bad servers, but worst of all, just an overall lack of interest. In that delay, it's hard to imagine that Capcom did anything but reduce all future plans REverse had, because you don't show off your new multiplayer game with just 2 maps. I don't want to harp on Capcom, or especially Neobards, because they were the ones who caught this impossible Hail Mary thrown at them. REverse was a multiplayer mode tacked onto RE8 that didn't have anything to do with RE8. Implementation of senseless microtransactions created a desperate feeling that this was yet again some misguided attempt to capitalize on the RE brand. The year-long delay meant that you had to dust off your copy of RE8 to remember if you could even play the game. If Steam engagements mean anything, it hit a peak player count of 2,080 at launch and retained around 20 of them throughout its life, though many days hit 0. On June 29, 2025, REverse ended all services, rendering the game completely unplayable. I'm not here to demand that all games need to be preserved, though they really should be. I really just want to reminisce with a silly feeling I had during the beta. Why the fuck is this actually kind of fun? Little is known about the development of REverse, but in my head, this is the thought that I imagine the devs were constantly feeling. I can't imagine being thrown a weird Capcom multiplayer pitch and the dread you get from not wanting to make just another bad RE multiplayer game. But it has to be a shooter, and god damn it, because Resident Evil really works as a sum of its parts, yet all you're given are its parts. But you work at it, squeezing every unique aspect out of every basic part to the point where you've been working too close to it for too long to know if it's any good, but when it finally gets into my hands, it's actually fucking kind of fun. So no, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't enough to reverse the tides of a tainted history or be extremely polished or novel or big or whatever you need to be successful in today's environment. But they really managed to make something good from a pit of no good faith. And to me, that's something worth remembering. This is Peepequod, and thank you for watching.